Budget 2018 was presented in the National Assembly on Monday, November 27. As such, the Department of Public Information has been conducting a series of interviews to get the views from various government ministers and MPs on Budget 2018. With us today for Budget in Focus is the Prime Minister, Honorable Moses Nagamootoo. Welcome to our program today.
Thank you very much.
First off, let's get your view on Budget 2018. What's your reaction?
I had said publicly that this was a budget that is different from the other budgets we have had. And it's a budget with a social content. It's a budget that has something for everyone. And I would think that a budget in the sum of 267 billion Guyana dollars would in fact cater for the needs of all of our people. So this is not a budget that has brought any surprises. In fact, the miners, the forestry producers, the taxi people and others in business, they have said it's a good budget. I would rather feel from the point of view of the ordinary person that there is a consensus that it has not brought in new taxes, it has not brought in any measures that would be adverse to the living conditions of our people. So, as was noted by commentators, it's a good budget.
Thank you for that. I know currently estimates are ongoing, and recently the Speaker upgraded the opposition MP. What's your comment to that?
The Speaker was quite in order. I think that the Speaker acted with grace and with tolerance throughout all the proceedings of the National Assembly. He's a very learned person, being an attorney at law, had been a diplomat, an outstanding diplomat, and he knows the art of the cut and thrust, even in the National Assembly. But there have been occasions since the 2015 elections when the opposition that had held office for well over 23 years would feel that it has an entitlement to bad behavior. It defies the Speaker, disobeys the Speaker, and on occasions, as we had seen on November 2nd, when the President of the Republic came to address the National Assembly, he was met by a righteous mob who took into the National Assembly for the first time placards, and they shouted throughout the address of the President. We thought that that was the day of infamy, because it was unprecedented. But now we found that there is a new cycle of disorderly behavior with one of the members, Juan Edghill, from the opposition, refused quite blatantly, told the Speaker in his face that I will not sit down, I will not obey you. And joined by all other members of the opposition in this open ruckus, this righteous behavior in the National Assembly. Listen, the Parliament is like a court. You cannot go into a court and decide that you will behave disorderly. You'll be put out. In fact, an orderly will either escort you out, and if you're deemed to be in contempt of court, you'll be confined to a lockup. Parliament is the high court of Parliament. And if the Speaker makes an order, it must be obeyed. And it carries sanctions if the Speaker's orders are not obeyed. But we have seen the deliberate disobedience of the Speaker's orders, the Speaker's ruling. And secondly, there was an occupation of the chambers of the National Assembly by members of the opposition, even when the Parliament was not in session, when it had been in recess. So that is another unprecedented act of physically occupying the Parliament. And then, of course, the Speaker requested the Sergeant at Arms to remove the disorderly MP, who again refused to obey the Sergeant at Arms. Reinforcement was requested for his physical ejection from the floor. And his colleagues decided they would surround him, and they must have planned this and shouting everyone would know they were shouting rape, rape, and all of that to sensationalize and to invent a news that didn't happen in the National Assembly. It was all intended as a scandalous episode in the history of our National Assembly. And so I believe that the Speaker acted quite in order. The suspension of the member was for a few days, but that's not the end of the matter. There is a court ruling, famous court ruling, that says that a contempt nor cannot be allowed to address a judge unless he would have purged himself of his contempt. Meaning you have to come to the court, admit you have committed a wrong, say that I am wrong, say I was wrong, and I apologize. So if the member, one Edgehill, does not come after the suspension is over and apologize, then a further suspension could be imposed. But that's a matter for the Speaker. And then you could lose your seat for the rest of the session, meaning the rest of the term of this Parliament. So I don't think you could reward bad behavior. There were people who said that the Speaker should not have put the member out, that the member was exercising his right as an MP. You don't have a right to bad behavior. When you have a right to drive a car on the road, and it says you must drive a car on the left side, you don't have a right to drive it on the right side. So that's even in a normal traffic. If you're walking on the road and you're told to walk on the left side of the road, you don't have a right to be on the right side unless you want to run into a vehicle or have a vehicle run into you. You don't have a right to endanger your life, and you don't have a right to put in jeopardy the freedom that you receive as a member of Parliament, receiving the votes of people to serve in the National Assembly. Now, the opposition had raised the issue that they were being muzzled, which is false, that they were being denied the right to speak to the budget. Now, the budget estimates are under review at this point. There was a committee that looks after the business of the Parliament, a bipartisan government opposition committee that would look after the business of the Parliament, and they will fix the number of days on which the debate should take place. The rules of the Parliament say that there's a maximum of 7 days for consideration of the estimates. Now, what it meant, Parliament would meet from 10 a.m., from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. That's 8 hours. If you have sit-ins for 7 days, that will give you 56 hours. I hope my arithmetic is correct. And we have now decided, there was a recommendation, there was a motion that was passed in the Parliament. Let us meet from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Now that will give you 12 hours. And if you multiply that by 5 days, it will give you 60 hours. So it means that on this occasion, the Parliament is meeting for a longer period to consider the estimate, not less, and therefore the opposition saying we are muzzled, we are not giving enough time to discuss and to raise questions. Look, when before the fracas took place in the Parliament, the members of the opposition, they were questioning one head. For about 2 hours, they were interrogating the Minister of Citizenship about the digitizing of documents at the General Registrar Office. Who was doing it? We need the name of every person. The Citizenship Minister said there were 80 persons. We need their names. We need their addresses. We need how much money they were working. Did they sign a contract? How many hours a day they were working, etc. This is called delaying tactics. This is filibustering. So they deliberately stall the proceedings to allow the time allotted for that ministry to be discussed so that they could raise this issue that they were being humbugged or restricted in the time to ask questions. So there is absolutely no merit. The opposition just came here. Remember, they declared a campaign of non-cooperation, and the non-cooperation took the form of boycotts
of the parliament when the elections were held in 2015. They boycotted the parliament. They said the elections were rigged. When the president first came to the assembly, they walked out. They said that some person had lost their job or something. They used that as an excuse to walk out. When I speak after the leader of the opposition in the House to round up the debate for the government side, they walked out again. So this is an opposition that has a tactic of withdrawal, of boycotts, of walking out, negative attitude, and they're doing all of that to be able to stir up among the people discontent, dissatisfaction, kind of revolt, if you like, because they have great ambition of returning to office, which is their right. They have a right to dream to return to office. No one should deny them that dream. But the question is that there is a way that you must behave. In a multi-party democracy, you have to behave in a responsible way. You cannot have anarchism. You can't just run about there and do as you please, and to stir up disorder in the society and to stir up unjustifiable fear and insecurity using race. And throughout the debate, as you have seen, they're carping on this ethnic issue. Why is it that you're providing lights in Linden, knowing the ethnic composition of Linden, and some village on the coast isn't given electricity? Now, this is very puerile opposition. So from a point of view of the government, we are very tolerant. As leader of government business in the House, we listen to the complaint, to the groaning, to the howling, and it disgusts us, of course, but it's what you can expect in some democracies. And so it's unfortunate that we have this development of disorderliness in the National Assembly, but I suppose we have to live with it for the rest of this term.
That brings me to, there are a lot of questions on social media as we speak in terms of people are saying, is this what we expect from our leaders? What would you say to that?
I share their disgust. This is not what leadership is about. And I have said in a comment I made to one of the media, I said this is going to remain so long as Mr. Jagdeo is at the head of the PPP, head of the opposition. This is a train, a political train that has gone amok. It's running wild, and it calls for restrained political leadership, or else you can lead to social conflicts. Young people in particular look up to leadership. They look up to the quality of their leaders. They don't want people running around as political leaders who abuse their offices. They don't want people who behave in excessive ways, in vulgar, what you call the cost down, abuse down politics. And unfortunately, this is, I can say this without any doubts in my mind. This is a typical Jagdeo politics: abuse down, cost up, and cut out. Cut and run. That is, for me, a negative politics. It doesn't take us anywhere. So we have to rein this in. We have to do better, all of us. I'm appealing to the opposition to see itself as an alternative government. And if you're an alternative government, then it puts more pressure on you to behave with modicum of respect, modicum of decency, and that you don't descend to the pit at every opportunity you have. You know, boisterousness has its place, but that is for the football field, it's for the cricket arena. That is for the spectators. When you sit in the stand, you can make noise and you can applaud, but when you're in the middle and you're a player, you don't make noise, you don't scream and howl. The game is serious. You have to play the game in the middle of the pitch very seriously. I think the opposition need to be reminded about that.
On that note, can we now talk about a little bit of parliamentary democracy What's your comment on the status of parliamentary democracy?
Our country has a very strong, vibrant, open parliamentary democracy. And this is a credit to all of our people, because we didn't want a parliament where you don't have open debates. This parliament meets very regularly, periodically. For example, I heard it was said that the opposition was being muzzled. But in the 10th parliament, under Mr. Donald Ramotar as president, Parliament met for 88 sit-ins on 88 occasions. We are now midterm in the 11th Parliament. Today is the 80th sit-in. By the time we finish, we'll be completing 83, 84 sit-ins. If we meet again before the Christmas holidays, we will have gone past the 88 sit-ins of the PPP government during its entire 10th Parliament. So there is no way you could put an allegation that we are curtailing the sittings of the National Assembly or we are muzzling the opposition. So we have an open Parliament. The opposition they have Opposition Members' Day, as well as opportunity to debate policies of the government and all legislative measures. That is what a parliament in a democracy does. Under an independent speaker, this parliament also has financial autonomy. There is a doctrine that is called the doctrine of the separation of powers, where the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary are independent of each other. They act in something called comity. They cooperate. They all have access to state funds, to the consolidated fund, to function. But in the case of the legislature, in the case of the judiciary, it was this government that brought in an amendment to the laws to allow the parliament and the judicature to have their own funds and to spend it in a way they think it should be spent. There are defined procedures in the Constitution and in the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act that would guide the way allocations are made, and they are approved by the National Assembly. The former PPP government resisted every attempt to make the judiciary financially accountable because they want the Chief Justice or the Chancellor to go and beg a minister for money. And we said, if you allow that to happen, you will compromise the independence of the judiciary. You'll put pressure on the courts to deliver judgment favorable to the government. It's the same with the Elections Commission. Elections Commission is an independent, autonomous body. The chairman of the Elections Commission should not be going to the president to beg for money. If you do that, then you are undermining and subverting the independence of the Elections Commission. In other words, that was the biggest rigging that was taking place. People don't understand that under the former government, the biggest rigging of the electoral process came when you had the Elections Commission go begging the presidency for money, the executive that has to participate in the elections. You have allowed the Elections Commission to be reduced to a toothless poodle of the executive, of the government. And we put a stop to that. We wanted always to put a stop to that type of relationship as it concerns the judiciary or it concerns the DPP or the parliament and a host of constitutional commissions that we believe should be independent. So that independence, financial independence, guarantees this protection of the separation of power. And our parliament is a multi-party government. Like everywhere, parliament, like in anywhere, you have a government and an opposition. But I am on record constantly throughout my political career as having called for a government of national unity. I believe that in 2015, it was the first time in 50 years that we broke the back of one-party rule. It was one party at one time for 28 years, and then there was another party for 23 years. Over 50 years, one-party rule. When we came into office in 2015, we came in a coalition, the APNU plus AFC, as a six-party coalition. It was the first time that you have a coalition of this type. And so it shows that Guyana is now riding the wave of multi-party democracy, multi-party governance. I would want to see that there would be constitutional change in this country. And I have been speaking to members of the opposition that this was a Jaganite idea. This was a Rodneyite idea, that you should have a government that is broad-based. And there's nothing wrong while you're fighting for political office to win in elections. That must not be the only basis on which you could prosecute political struggles. You must also fight to have inclusivity, a government of inclusion, so that you can broaden the base and the scope of a national government. National governments are important, multi-party national governments, multi-ethnic national governments in societies such as ours. I remember many years ago reading Dr. Harold Lachman and Professor James. They wrote a book about the political environment in Guyana. And they recommended that Guyana should have what you call an autochthonous political constitution. That an autochthonous political constitution is an indigenous, local, domestic constitution that is based on the needs and the peculiarities of your own country. And so I started to advocate for that. And Cheddi Jagan, with whom I worked for all my political life as such, 50 years of it, had always taught me that you cannot have all struggle and no unity. Struggle must have a purpose. If you're struggling for something, it must not be just for struggle's sake. You have to struggle for something. And struggle must lead to unity. There must be struggle and unity. And you must have unity in struggle. So what I see happening here is nihilistic. It's going nowhere if you're just talking about struggling for political office. So that a change becomes like an exchange. You have to struggle to enrich the content of governance and to make the governance reflective of the composition of our people. And the unity. There must be struggle and unity. And you must have unity in struggle. So what I see happening here is nihilistic. It's going nowhere if you're just talking about struggling for political office. So that a change becomes like an exchange. You have to struggle to enrich the content of governance and to make the governance reflective of the composition of our people and the aspirations of our united people. So yes, our system of democracy is very secure, but at the same time, it will face challenges to meet the expectations of the diverse nature of our community, its multiculturalism, its diverse plural nature. Yes, our democracy is on a solid rock-like foundation because for the first time we have freedom of expression, freedom of the press. We don't have a situation anymore with the type of intolerance that had led a government to use advertisement, state advertisement to smother an independent media. We don't have a situation anymore where journalists like Frederick Yassoon, he could be subjected to feces being thrown on him because someone didn't like his opinion or his views. I don't like everything Freddie writes, but I read them and I defend his right for him to write the way he writes because that's Frederick Yassoon. He's open, he's controversial, and he has a creative mind to comment on things in a manner he thinks he should comment, and that's his right. You don't dump a bucket of feces on him for doing that. You don't run around because you don't like a journalist and say, don't come to the office of the president, don't cover official press conferences or events. You don't have to go around calling journalists Karen Crows and intimidating them in the exercise of their function. There is an independent media. And as I said earlier, I said it has now brought some new issues as to whether political parties have a right to have licenses to broadcast. This is a new dimension that was introduced by the previous administration, the Bar Jagdeo administration, where he literally gave his own political party, the PPP, a license to operate on several frequencies and to have a radio station literally ensconced in the headquarters of a ruling party, then ruling party, to which ministers of government were directors of the organization that benefited from the license. To me, it had introduced a new dimension to broadcasting in Guyana. It has introduced the introduction of divisive politics on the airwaves, and it is something that I think that the Guyana National Broadcasting Authority should pay keen attention to. Those licenses that were handed out in a manner that will hurt and undermine freedom of expression and the openness that I think we deserve in this country without taking the divisions and the acrimony and the hostility. I believe that this government, led by President Granger, and of which I am a very key player, has brought about a new feeling among Guyanese, here and abroad, that we have a stable democracy, we have a peaceful democracy, we have an open democracy, multi-democracy, where the rights of the Guyanese people are protected. This must be one of the few countries in the world. We do not have political prisoners in jail. We don't have political dissidents in jail. We don't have extrajudicial killings anymore. The type we saw under the previous government, where hundreds of young people were slaughtered in what was considered then by the president, then as a war among the drug lords or the drug gangs. We don't have assassination. We didn't, of course. We saw under the previous administration, a minister of the government was assassinated. No inquiry took place. We don't know. There are a lot of opinions in the society that the assassination was due to the incestuous relationship between the political directorate and the drug lords. You need to have an independent commission to investigate, because that remains a blemish in our society. And so we don't have many of the features that had given Guyana a bad name in the international community. We don't have pervasive corruption that had placed Guyana at the bottom of the corruption perception index in the Caribbean. We don't have that image of a dirty country. We brought in laws to regulate money laundering. We brought in laws to regulate the use of Guyana as a territory to conspire, to plan, or to execute acts of terrorism. We have been able to contain the worst prison outbreak and fire in this country caused by overcrowdedness for many, many years of neglect of the prison system. We have been able to bring in laws and reinforce laws that would deal with stolen assets, state assets. People do not have a right, because they serve in the government, to thief state assets. So we brought a law that's called the Recovery of State Assets. And so some people may not like this. We have seen for the first time an uncompromising fight against the illicit trade in drugs. We have intercepted and seized aircraft that had landed in Guyana illegally. We have intercepted and detained boats, ocean-going vessels that would have large quantities of cocaine, some suspected to be involved in trafficking of drugs. We have carried out an intense, consistent campaign against human trafficking. And you know, we have gone into the interior and we have retrieved and we have recovered and we have saved, protect girls who had been taken into the interior to be part and parcel of what is called, in a very perverse term, as a flesh market. And so we have had a wide landscape of laws and put in place measures to contain the violation of the image of Guyana as a free, open, safe country. But of course, that work continues. You know, the progress we made fighting piracy, the progress we made in being able to man our interior, provide escorts to patrols on horseback. The opposition was laughing at us, dogs and ponies. Dogs and ponies. We are training a canine branch right now to be able to help us to do drugs interdiction, and we are still trying to complement our number of horses that we can send into the interior. We are doing aerial patrols over sea coast to ensure that pirates do not harass our fishermen. We are doing aerial surveillance and foot patrol in the interior to ensure that banditos and those who would come to harass our miners do not have ready and free access into our territory. So I can go on, you see, and tell you more about this democracy we are building in this country. There are a lot of reasons for Guyana to feel not only safe and secure in this country once again, but to celebrate in a very modest way that we are making progress. We are on the right track, and you have a good government, and you have a good opposition too, but the opposition has to be responsible. And we believe that it is with pride that I share in this government, and not only share in its decision making, but participate actively on a daily basis in bringing the good life to our people. And I am optimistic that this good life is attainable. This good life is within our reach. And we could all bask in satisfaction that we have come a far way along this road. When we would open up new industries, when new opportunities would present themselves, not only in oil and gas, but also the way we broaden the base in developing a green economy and to develop agriculture as a potential. Our new frontier must be agriculture, agro-processing, and we must get into the market to supply foods, not only to the Caribbean, but to the rest of the world. Guyana is not only proverbially the breadbasket. Guyana is the agricultural zone of the Caribbean. It is the agricultural department of the Caribbean. It is the agricultural reserve of the Caribbean for livestock, for other crops, vegetable, fruits. You say it, you name it, and we have it. Because we have an abundance of fresh water. We have, of course, very good laws that facilitate investments. And we have also security for investors, money. There's no practice in our government to expropriate people's property or to take away their investments. We insist that those who come, they obey the laws and they can be a partner. So, yes, we are winding down 2017, and we can say that, yes, we have a good country, and we have a good government, and we have a good democracy.
So, we can't wrap up this program without talking about sugar, the budget and sugar.
Okay.
So, I know over time governments have been, well, the government, past and current government, is plugging money into the industry. What's your take on government's focus for sugar?
Okay, so there will be a sugar industry for the future. The idea being peddled that sugar is being shut down, it's fake news. Gaisuco will continue to be involved in sugar, 3 estates and 5 cultivation areas. In other areas, the Gaisuco has enunciated a policy that they had shared with government, that they want to have diversification, divestment, and to have partnership. So we'll have to see what will be made, what will be done in the areas where the estates are closed. First of all, I'm interested in the workers who have been made redundant. They should have severance pay. If you can't give them all now, you give them part of it, and then you can give them part later on. Secondly, and I think this is now being rolled out, because I went public on this issue. I spoke in the National Assembly that I have been very sad, I've been very disappointed that in the manner in which we went about doing some of the things that had happened, that's the Gaisuco. I've now noted that Gaisuco is making available some offer of land to persons who work in the sugar industry. I think if they want to come into cultivation of the land, just like people had done in Blackbush Pola, in Tapakuma, in Canals Pola, these were once rice growing, cane growing areas. When Port Moran factory was closed down, people went into rice in Blackbush Pola. And so we believe that you need to open a new opportunity for those in the industry. You must be able to know how many workers would be absorbed in the NDIA, that's the National Drainage and Irrigation Authority, to take over some of the functions that Gaisuku had handled in looking after drainage and irrigation. You need to know how many workers are likely to be taken on by the new investors, the new businesses that will emerge in these areas after the divestment process. So that there is no loss of hope. About 4,000 workers will have to be severed, or they'll have to be reintegrated into business places, but there's disappointment. There's, yes, among those workers who feel that they're now out of a job, they will have to be re-geared and retrained, and to be available for alternative work. No one said that sugar will become the only means of livelihood for cane cutters or sugar workers forever. People are moving on. Many Guyanese who left Guyana and went to the United States, who were sugar workers in Guyana, they are not cutting cane in the United States. They are not cutting cane in Toronto. They are not cutting cane in the Caribbean islands where they have relocated. So we cannot say that this is the only method by which one can earn a living. So I'm hoping that I can play a role in seeing that the children of sugar workers should have an opportunity to enter into training schools, should have an opportunity to enter into university. I would work with Gaisuku. I'd work with any partner that would be able to invest in the children of sugar workers where estates are affected by closures. Work with investors to encourage them to take on people, even if they have to train them again, to work in factories, agro-processing factories, to work in other types of employment. So I think that on one side of the coin, you see some gloom right now that persons are getting retrenchment notices. But you could turn this gloom into a light, into a fairly bright light. You could look at the positive side and the opportunities and the prospect for alternative livelihood, sustainable livelihood. And I think that all is not lost in sugar. I have a lot of hope for sugar yet, in the same way that you had not so long ago, just 2 years ago, when we lost the attractive market in Venezuela with rice. There was a chorus immediately that went up from the opposition that the new government was killing the rice industry. We had no blame. We had no responsibility for that at all, what Venezuela did. I have a feeling that the former government, there might have been officials of the government who conspired with Venezuela to bring this about, to put pressure on us as soon as we got into government. And they squandered the money that was placed in the Petro-Caribbean Fund so that they had no way in which they could help quickly the former government to rehabilitate rice farmers or to stabilize the price for rice and paddy. But, for example, I went to Mexico, and immediately I was able to raise a chorus of the needs of the Guyanese people. And so we have now sent 88,000 tons of paddy to Mexico, open up a new market. And since then, we are selling rice to Panama. We are selling rice and paddy to Cuba. We are selling rice now to Peru. So we have now created new markets. So wherever there is a challenge, on the flip side of a challenge, there would also be opportunity. And we have created new opportunity for the rice industry, and we are hoping that with the intervention of the state, with the cooperation of Gaisuku, the unions in the sugar industry, and business sector, private business, local and foreign investors, that we can come out with a platform that will make opportunities available for sugar workers and those who had once worked in the sugar industry.
Before we wrap up, I know when we spoke on Budget Day, you said this is a people's budget. Is that still your view?
Yes, in fact, when I said that, I was not fully apprised of all the contents that you had in the budget, region by region. When you look at the region, what they're getting, the infrastructural development in the region, you'll see that there hasn't been a single region that will not get something new in the budget. Whether it is just incremental at this point in time, you are seeing openings for new jobs, you're seeing openings for new investment opportunities, you're seeing opening for infrastructural works, and therefore this would bring about improvement. You see opening for new telecommunication, internet connectivity, you're seeing opening for young people coming out of the HAYES program. 4,000 or 3,000 had been involved, are getting self-employment and being assisted to stand on their own 2 feet. This is not feeding them, spoon-feeding them and placing them in a position of a mendicant, of be literally beggars. You're creating entrepreneurs. You're creating self-employed persons out of a scheme that once had treated young people that they are only fit to live on handouts with a stipend and don't have to work or don't have to be trained to do anything. You're seeing in the communities little projects that would change the lives of these communities. So everything cannot be done. We are here only for 1,000 days, almost there, 1,000 days in office. And we have another 1,000 days. We have a lot of time ahead of us still. This is the midterm. And one cannot assume that you could do everything that had been done wrong, or most of the things that have been done wrong in the past many years, you could fix it in 2 or 2.5 years. When we came in, we had to be able to plant our feet firmly in office, and we met enormous problems. We don't have to go back there and recreate those problems. We don't have to even intimidate people with the specter of the city being a garbage city. We didn't have to intimidate anyone or remind them of this being a dirty, filthy, nasty capital that we had inherited with garbage at the head of every street. And the stench was evident for everyone, the flies. Now, that was a horrible thing to come into office to meet. But we put that behind us. And look at how we're now trying to build a structured society. Putting in roads, putting in bridges, putting in new facilities, repairing schools, repairing medical facilities, improving the transportation, providing buses for children, bicycle, boats. Hey, come on. We are not magicians. And I don't claim to be one, but I can tell you, this has been really a journey of joy. To be able to create the things that people need and people would feel better about, even though we are not doing enough. We are not doing enough. We must not beat up on ourselves that we have not done something. And we are doing something every day, and I think that one has to applaud the Guyanese people, that they understand that you can't change everything one time. The man out there and the woman out there who is getting a small increase in the pension has a reason to celebrate that, listen, they didn't keep it where it was. They have increased it. It has increased 50%. The people who were looking at their minimum wages, they now have something to say, okay, over the last 2.5 years, where has the minimum wage gone? Then they now know that it has been increased by 50%. And even though they may say, listen to opposition saying about ministers that the government received 50% increase, which is not true. There were 13 ministers that had gotten an increase of their salary to bring it to the level of permanent secretary, or a senior minister to be at the level of an advisor to the president. Nothing was wrong with that. But no minister got a single cent increase in their salary since the last first and only increase. So the minimum wage in the meantime went up 50%. So everyone now has a reason to believe that something new has affected their life. The cleaners and the sweepers in schools, they believe that something new has improved their lives. And so we believe that we are going into a new year, and we are going into the new year with hope. We are going in the new year believing that we could improve what we did in the past. We can improve on what we did last year, the year before. Because for me, politics is about continuity. It's about continuing what has happened before. We don't have to claim that we had the plans for everything. We can say that we are thankful to the previous and past governments that they left some plans and they left some projects on the ground. Because these are not the projects that belong to any one party, they're the projects that belong to the people. And the people's money had been invested in these projects. So we don't want to say that we give no credit to the former government or previous government. Yes, because that's what continuity means, is to pick up where another has left and continue the journey. So we are now continuing the journey to the good life.
Okay, so briefly, how pleased are you with what has been allocated for areas that you overlook?
Well, I'm not a complainer. I'm not a griper. I don't grope about having more money. I want to know whether I have opportunity to do something. The office of the Prime Minister has a very small budget. And from there, we are able to provide subvention to DPI, and you're doing a wonderful job. To NCN, radio, television, we could do better. And we have money available for constitutional reform, to be able to set up also the Integrity Commission, to have declarations of assets and salaries of public officials, and to be able to enforce the code of conduct for persons in public life. Now, those are some of the immediate areas, but money doesn't reflect what the Prime Minister does. The Prime Minister is here as leader of government business in the National Assembly. I helped to put together the government's parliamentary agenda. I supervise the enforcement of the parliamentary agenda and participate in a subcommittee of cabinet to introduce all the legislative changes we want to make in the House. I am the chairperson with the leave of the President. I chair cabinet and the business session of cabinet. I chair the cabinet subcommittee that handles the major business of the government. And so I keep sessions in between of cabinet and also participate in the cabinet discussion on all the businesses of the government. I participate in a helping way and to coordinate with other ministers, whether in the field of agriculture, social cohesion, health, education, labor, whatever way I could be of help in other ministries, and I go out into the country to participate in the work of other ministries, to be able to coordinate and to encourage all of our ministries to work as part and parcel of a teamwork. This is the team coalition, and therefore the Prime Minister is not removed and distant from all the things the government is doing, all the agencies, all the ministries. Also, you would know that as a member of National Security Committee, member of the Defense Board, I have an active role in ensuring that there is an architecture of safety for the Guyanese people, an architecture of protection for our border, the defense of our territorial sovereignty, our integrity. These are part and parcel of the functions of the Prime Minister, that no salary or no amount of votes in the National Assembly would be able to sufficiently service these interests and activities that I do on a daily basis. So I have come into government and I ensure that I have a small professional team working with the Prime Minister. I don't have a speechwriter. I research my speeches almost myself and write these speeches. I have one person working as coordinator for my parliamentary function, one person for governance and constitutional reform and other things, constitutional commissions. So I have a very small working group. And so in government, money is not all. You can be frugal. You could be tight. I restrict my travels overseas. And I ensure that on the occasions that I have to travel that have nothing to do with representing, say, the president, or in some capacity like going to the funeral of Fidel Castro or of the late Prime Minister of Trinidad, or to go to UNISOR heads of government conference, or to the swearing in of some president. These are functions that you may not have a choice to ask a host country to send a ticket. But wherever I go to represent Guyana at conferences, I would insist that the sponsors would send a ticket, air travel, and I've been doing this before. When I was a minister for many years before, I hadn't been traveling on first-class tickets or staying in hotels at the government expenses. And this is known. Sometimes you hear the opposition now, they tease me about it. I'm Prime Minister, so I've been advised not to fly in economy. But it doesn't matter. When I leave Timeri or Chedijagan International Airport, nobody knows me, so I don't expect them to know me and to feel that I am a VIP in the first class. So, but I'm advised security-wise that, no, you can't do that. You could travel in the business class at least. So money for my ministries, the portfolio responsibilities that I have, I will always try to cut the corners and to save where savings are possible. And so I believe that as a leader of government, you have to set the example in placing yourself at the service of the Guyanese people, but that it does not, that service must not be tailored in terms of the quantity of money you have. Yes, we would all like to have more money to look after this, that, and the other thing that we would want to. But if you can't have it this year, we'll have to bear our share and deal with it next year. And so for those matters that are under my remit, I have not questioned the allocations.
Thank you very much. There you have it. Those are the views of Prime Minister of Ghana, the Honorable Moses Nagamootoo. Thank you for joining us on this program, and thank you for the time.
Thank you very much.